like 6 months ago. And at first, I did a couple of weeks, like gave myself a little bit of a cushion, and then I got a lot of demand, at least in my local area of Cincinnati. You're in Fort Wayne, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, I got and people started coming on, and I got like so backlogged. I started releasing by like two episodes a week, and that was a tough schedule. That was a tough schedule, especially if you got your side projects you want to do, and then you got work, and then you have just life responsibilities, and it's a very very it's a tenuous thing to try to do. It's
Yeah, I thankfully I've made it so that I prefer to have guests on my episode, but or on my episodes, but I do occasionally just do a solo episode where I just watch a movie and just talk for an hour, and I'm like, okay, this is an episode. Cool. See you later. Bye.
I haven't done that yet. I haven't done a solo episode. There's a number of things I could talk about, but the back and forth is something that really really helps when it comes to
Yeah,
that. Otherwise, I feel like I'm just making a long YouTube video.
I way prefer having guests on, but just in an effort to make sure that I can. For a while, I moved to biweekly, but I moved back to weekly quite a while ago because I was like, every once in a while, I'll just be like, what are my top five favorite Tarantino films? That's these. Okay, see you later. Bye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, go ahead and introduce yourself, and tell me how you got started with filmmaking.
Sure. Um, Sorry, one second. I just need to answer this.
So this is my guest, Jake. One
All,
second.
all yours. um, so, yes, I, most people know me as Jake Baker. I professionally go by Jake Ryan Baker, not because I'm pretentious. It's just because Jake Baker is a very plain name, and if I need people to find me, it's easier to just go by Jake Ryan Baker than Jake Baker.
Yeah.
But I've been my journey into filmmaking's been weird. I talk to other filmmakers all the time, and they tell me, "Oh, I got a camcorder when I was 11, and I was in my backyard
Mm.
making dinosaur movies with my figurines and stuff." And I'm always so jealous of that origin story because I wrote a little bit when I was in high school, but it was always like prose and like fantasy stories where I was just like me and my friends were like fighting with swords and magic and stuff. But
Yeah.
when I got into college, about a year or two in, I saw a screenwriting class and I was like, wait a second, I like movies. People have to write them. And I had genuinely, when I was in college, it wasn't until college that I even understood that people wrote movies. And so
Mm.
it's an embarrassingly late discovery. And so I took the screenwriting class and I was like, whoa, this is my new thing. I'm a writer and I love movies. I want to write movies. And so I started writing screenplays. And then through that class, I, of course, met people who had already discovered that nobody makes your movies. You have to make them. And so I
Yep.
started getting on sets and just being like, oh, it's really fun to hang out with people. And then I got bit by the bug pretty hard. And I started wanting to make film and direct. I didn't want to just be a writer, I wanted to be a director as well. And it was kind of weird because I think a lot of people get started by making short films and sort of building up and building up and building up.
Hmm.
And I worked on some short films as like a crew member and helped out with them. And then I just kind of jumped 2 feet in and co-directed a feature as like essentially my first directing project. We
Interesting.
so
That is definitely not the normal.
Yeah, and we sort of broke it up in a way. It was an anthology movie, and so we made it was almost like making several short films, but three of those films were like 40 minutes long. So they were lengthy processes. And I think it was sort of like the folly of youth being like a 20 something where we're just like, yeah, we'll just make a whole movie. Who cares? And it turns out, reflecting on the process, we tricked a lot of people into believing in us and had a lot of really like professional people, both like really great actors in Fort Wayne and people that knew what they were doing crew wise. Big shout out to the DP on my first film, Dan Catter, who just was a seasoned professional who I think kind of hard carried us through that production. uh, And then, making that was like a years long process. But again, just the folly of youth, where it would just, we're like, yeah, this is it, this is the thing. And then, you finish a film and it's like 2.5 hours long, and you're like, yeah, this is fine. And then you start submitting it to festivals and you're like, oh wait, nobody wants to see this. uh,
It's like
and
screenplays actually is like, because if you want, if you're a writer, you have to, if you're a writer, and that's kind of the thing that you at least start off with or doing, similar to like myself, which I can kind of relate to you on this, is that we, because we love writing, our scripts end up being too long. Especially if you're going to submit it to competitions
yes.
and then festivals. Like I think last year I finished a 170 page screenplay that I was working my butt off to try to make sure that I could actually keep the story moving along. And then I started realizing, oh, nobody's going to take this. And yeah, with creativity, you either have to, it's awful because you have to decide, all the things that you love, what is actually the most important. And when you're showing it to people or submitting to festivals or stuff like that, you feel like you're just sort of killing your baby or slicing it to death and just amputating the parts that you love off of it in order to just make it acceptable. Did you find any circumstances where you found that you had to really make compromises that you had a hard time with when it come to approaching a project?
Well, I think with the feature, it was very much like we were in our Tarantino era, and we thought we could do all the cool big moving pieces and action, and then very quickly you find out just the practical reality of things is, you can't have this. It's not easy to just fill a bar full of people and have all these moving parts. You have to be really creative with how you shoot things and try to keep things contained. And I think that even back then, it was like, oh, we'll have a little fight scene here. And then once you start actually breaking down the realities of like what a fight scene looks like, you're just like, oh, this is really hard. And so I think, with each thing that we made, we started getting a little more realistic, like with what's possible, especially with no budget, because we truly made that feature for no money. I think the most money we shelled out the entire time was like there was one part where we filmed it in this apartment building and we rented the place for like $500, and that was by far and away the most money we spent on the movie. And as I've gotten more into filmmaking, the more it's just like filmmaking is a really tough creative field to be in, because it is a very expensive creative field to be in if you want to like do things a certain way. And there's a lot of like hard work and elbow grease that you can use to sort of circumnavigate certain costs. And I'm a filmmaker here in Fort Wayne in the Midwest. I do think that a lot of times if you just ask questions and ask favors, sometimes you can surprise yourself with what you're able to get your hands on. But a lot of it just comes down to just being realistic about what's possible. And honestly, the more I've made stuff, the more I've looked at my scripts and been like, that's going to be a huge pain in the butt. Maybe I just change that to something else, so that like when I'm actually trying to do this, I'm not like pulling my hair out because I'm like, oh, I just really wanted this specific thing. And now I think a good example is there's a scene in a feature I'm about to make, or not a scene, but there was a sort of an underlying thing in the feature that I'm about to make where one of the characters has like a bruise for a little bit. And I started like really breaking down. I was like, does this character really need a bruise? Because all of a sudden I'm going to have to start tracking this bruise, and we're going to have to put the bruise on like every day. And would the bruise even still be there? I'm like talking myself out of like having this bruise because it's just creating so much work. I was like, is it necessary?
What were the things that you took away from doing co-directing that first feature that you did when it came to, once it was finished, starting to approach your own projects to make sure that, one, you can also get your creative vision out on the board, but also, choosing your battles wisely?
I think one of the big things is just, trying to communicate your vision to the rest of your casting crew, and then also like learning to be collaborative, because their interpretation might be different. And honestly, sometimes it might be better And
Hmm.
it's really important that you not get so stuck in your ways as to be like, no, I had this very specific way that you needed to say this word, and we're not moving on until we get it. It's being allowing yourself to be like, just I think flexibility and just being able to take things that come and embrace what it's like to work in a collaborative medium like film, because there's really just nothing like it in terms of trying to work together with a group to create a certain vision. And I do think that having like a strong
Hmm.
voice is important too. It's this weird push and pull of trying to come in and be like, it's this way and I see it this way, and like steering the ship, but somehow still being able to just like turn on a dime and be like, and this works too. It's a real tightrope act.
How did you go about sourcing your crew? What's the film community in Fort Wayne, kind of like? Because I'm from the Cincinnati, Dayton, Columbus area here in Ohio.
It's interesting. One of the things that I always say about Fort Wayne is we have this really robust theater community, almost more than a lot of other, I think, cities our size. There's just so much theater going on, and that was one of the first steps that really got me going in filmmaking, is having this kind of incredible pool of actors that were local, that were interested in doing film, and they were already like seasoned and professional and had just done so many shows, and were great to work with. I think like when we made that first feature, one of the cornerstones was we worked with these actors, Brad and Leslie Beauchamp, and they're anyone in Fort Wayne knows who they are. Leslie now runs the Arena Dinner Theater, and Brad is this amazing dude that's like directed plays and been in plays for decades at this point. And working with people that were so professional and knew what they were doing was a really big step up, and it lended a credibility to us when we were like nobodies. People were like, oh, Brad and Leslie are working on this, okay, sure, these guys must be doing something. And I think for I'm assuming this is like this with any community, it's a matter of like establishing those first connections and then sort of building out from there. I think getting to know Brad and Leslie, and having such a great working relationship with them opened up a lot of doors for us to work with other people. And so I'm really lucky to have made a lot of connections to the local Fort Wayne theater community, because there's so many great actors that we get to work with. And then in filmmaking, things have moved into a more digital, mobile age. Obviously, it's not like the 70s where you have to have a whole team that knows how to run a film camera. Like anyone can make movies with their phone these days, but we do have like some working professionals in Fort Wayne that do filmmaking full time. A lot of people I work with, they spend a lot of their weeks doing commercial stuff,
Hmm.
making commercials for example, a helicopter company. Some of my friends worked on a commercial for that recently, and then they, try to make narrative fiction in their spare time, or they do documentaries. And people that know their way around a film set are people that know their way around a film set, regardless of like what the subject matter is. But there's, I think, almost anywhere where there's even like a remotely big city, there's people that are trying to make movies, and you can find them eventually. And Fort Wayne, I think, has sort of a growing film community, and I think that if you are around enough, there are people that know what they're doing. And I've been really lucky to connect with people like my producer Victoria Britton, who's worked on tons and tons of professional projects, and she goes down to Indy and works all over. And I'm like, hey, Victoria, do you know someone that could be a good first AC? And she's like, here's a list of people that I trust.
Hmm.
And that is the other thing, is like maybe not everybody's necessarily Fort Wayne local. Maybe someone's coming in from Indy, or on my upcoming feature, one of my guys is coming in from Pittsburgh, just because
Okay.
he worked on another movie with my DP, and they got along really well. And he was like, I'd love to work with that guy again. And so he's like, sure, I'll drive in from Pittsburgh. And I'm like, cool. I will feed you and put you up. Uh,
Well, I'm somewhat familiar with the Pittsburgh crowd a little bit. A number of years ago, some people from that community came and filmed a found footage feature in I think it's London. It's not Landon, Ohio. It's London, Ohio. And I met some of the crew from up there. And by happenstance, when somebody from that community reached out, to maybe potentially come on the podcast, and I took a look at his work and whatnot. And it turns out he knew some of the people from all those years ago that were on that film that I happened to be PAing on, and we crossed paths in that at some point because he was an extra in that film. And what thing I found really surprising is how interconnected some of these local communities are with people that are fairly far away, actually. And because we're trying to all lend a helping hand to be able to get our projects off the ground so we can all help grow. And because we're in the Midwest here, we're not connected to a lot of, industry areas. Now it's getting a little bit better because, you got Atlanta, which honestly is kind of more of a hub than Hollywood at the moment. And Nashville is growing, and so we have this chain that's kind of going up through the Midwest because we have these great tax credits that that have come on within a few recent years, and I think there's actually a lot of hope for the industry coming to our area, and I don't think we'll have to wait too terribly long for that type of work to actually start amalgamating in our area. We don't. There's a little light at the end of the tunnel. We don't.
yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting too. I think that the deeper you get in, the more things that you never maybe thought about. A tax credit matters a lot, and in Indiana, that's been like a subject of conversation in film circles for a while. Is like, when are we gonna get the tax breaks so people stop going to Ohio to make movies set in Indiana? And I'm over here being like, I don't understand the finances of it, but apparently it matters. So give us our dang tax credit. And it's been, I don't know, Indiana. I love my community in Fort Wayne, and I don't know if I necessarily believe in like pride from having just happened to have been born somewhere, but I do like. I love the people that I've been able to meet living in this community, but there are times when Indiana specifically as a state can be very frustrating. We
like creatively,
we're really behind the curve when it. What's that?
Like creatively, or in other ways, or is it culture? Like what kind of specifically are you referring to?
I think just in terms of like as a state, we don't have a lot of priorities towards like the creative arts, or even just recreationally. I find it insane. What's that?
It's a very blue collar state.
Yeah, and I also think that recreationally, even just something as silly as like Indiana's like the one holdout in terms of like legalizing weed. Like, what are we even doing? Like, I thought for sure that at least the money aspect of it would be enough to get it over the hill in terms of like, you can make a lot of money taxing these weed places, and even that's still like to find out that your state is still just so stuck up and stuck in the old ways that they're just like, no, weed is evil. And it's like, by the way, buy all the booze you want, it's totally fine. It's just like, what are we doing? It's just like, I just feel like there are some things about Indiana that feel very ancient in a bad way. And but on the other hand, I get to live in a community where going up to someone and being like, I'm a filmmaker is enough to have some people be like, whoa, that's so cool. And I'm putting together this feature that I'm putting together. It's been a real boon to be in a community where telling someone I'm making a real movie is enough to get them excited. Because I have a lot of friends out in LA that are like, everyone that lives in LA is so jaded. If they see you making a movie, they come out with their lawnmowers and start mowing until you pay them to go away. Whereas here in Fort Wayne, someone's like, well, you're making a movie, have the full use of my restaurant for free. And you're like, oh,
Yeah,
okay.
getting locations in the Midwest is actually, people are really friendly because it's like, oh, I've never seen the process of like what it looks like for a movie to be made, and then normally the owners of the locations they'll kind of hang around and be like, oh my gosh, it's so cool, and
Hmm.
you get to see like the first impression of like people who that they could, because making movies is magic. Movies aren't just magic when you watch them. Making movies is also magic, and when you get to see somebody witness that magic for the first time, it kind of reinvigorates your soul in a way artistically, and it's like, oh yeah, what I'm doing is kind of fun and special, and it's not all stress and
Yeah.
headaches.
It's pretty easy to become jaded because I love. There's nothing like making film. I always say if I could get up every day and just be on a film set, I probably would. But it is easy to get exhausted by it. Time is so time is never more relative than when you're on a film set and you're just like,
Mhm.
yeah, we got 12 hours to do this thing, and you turn around and you're like, it's been 8 hours. We're not even close to finished. What is going on?
Mhm.
It's pretty terrifying, and it is funny. I've definitely been on sets before where a producer's really excited to come see you make a movie, but sometimes you're not shooting the exciting stuff. Sometimes you're shooting these two characters are sitting on a couch and having this like serious conversation scene.
Mhm.
And I've definitely been on a couple sets where the producers come by and you give them the monitor and they're watching, and then like 30 minutes later they're kind of like, oh, we're doing take 7 of the same 3 lines of
Yep.
dialogue that we've been doing, and they kind of just go, oh. And I've definitely been on set with a lot of extras who, when they first get there, they're so excited to see the cameras and the
Oh, I
crew and
know, right?
everybody running around, and then like an hour in, they're like, I'm just sitting here. uh
Yeah, it's a hurry up and wait game.
yeah. Some
The
people stay enthusiastic about it, and I love the grind of it. I love getting the lines right. I love finding the right chemistry in the reads, and getting the timing right, working with actors is my favorite aspect of filmmaking, and so I thrive in like doing those second, third, fourth takes, and finding what we can pull from it. But I do know from like the outside, when you're, especially when you have like a job to do, it can
Mhm.
be really easy to start to like fade a little bit. But I agree, like seeing people like get enthusiastic about it is amazing, and it does remind you of like, oh, we're doing something special actually.
Mhm. Yeah. The gentleman I had on my podcast, Malachi, who I believe also Victoria is producing, if I recall correctly, his next feature he's trying to get off the ground. How do you know him, or like what's the relationship there?
uh Sorry, can you repeat the question?
How do you know Malachi? He was the individual who I had on the podcast a few weeks ago, to who recommended you as a guest, and somebody, because I'm getting more familiar with different people outside of the Cincinnati and Columbus area in different pockets of the country who don't
Yeah.
get a lot of attention.
It it definitely was. It, Fort Wayne, it is a pretty close knit community in terms of filmmaking. So generally, if you work with somebody, they'll have worked with somebody that you know. And so a while back, Malachi was making a film, Dead End Dreams, and
That was a good
several
film.
people that I knew. Yeah, great. It's man, all the actors that he pulled in for that are just so amazing, and it's just a gorgeous looking film. And I was lucky enough to, and I always try to be aggressive about getting on sets and networking and meeting new people. And
Hmm.
so Victoria and Dan, who are people that I've worked with several times before, were working on his movie, and I was like, hey yo, can I get on that set? And I just, uh, I think I was just there. I ran sound a couple times. I was doing BTS. It was just basically like any day they were shooting where I wasn't working, I just dropped by and connected with everybody, and tried to help out as much as I could. I I ran to Lowe's and found like a ceiling light replacement when we busted the one that we took out to replace the lights for a scene. It's just like that's one of the things is like I've made a lot of friends and a lot of connections just sort of elbowing my way onto sets in any way that I can. I've agreed to be an extra in films, and I'm still Facebook friends with people that I've only ever worked with as an extra. I've done PA stuff. I've run sound. I do the gopher thing. Like, oh, you need someone to go pick up the catering order for lunch. All right, I will go do that. And you just meet people as much as you can because connecting with people and networking is like the most important thing maybe of everything. Going back to what I was talking about is like getting Brad and Leslie in our movie opened all these doors to meet all these other people, and now I just have known these people for over a decade, and it's all about just like talking to people and making connections. And I always say like proving you're not a psycho, which unfortunately sometimes is like the bar. You hear stories from other people where it's like you just hear about these like nightmare people that other people have worked with on sets, and
creatives with egos who think they're like a gift from God.
Yes, and
like my script is going to change the world. You don't understand this.
and it can be like that because there's a tough aspect of being in a creative field. You do get egos, and you do get being a director can feel very much like playing God occasionally, and I've certainly run into my fair share of egomaniacs, or just people that are just I hear stories of like bigger sets where PAs have gotten fired for just being kind of irritating to be around, and it just like it's part of I think working in such a collaborative environment is being somebody that people want to work with, and thankfully I've gotten to the point where a lot of the connections I've made are if Victoria or Malachi say this person's cool, I can know for a fact that they're great to work with, and part of it is like being someone that they would turn around and say, oh, Jake, yeah, he's cool, you should have him on. I've been filmmaking now since I was in college in like 2010, so we're going on 15 years or so of making movies and cultivating relationships and reputation. It goes both ways, where I hear a lot of names and people say that guy's great to work with, she's great to work with, and then I hear like he really sucks, be careful about that one, and then that's everything, I think.
Well, in a small when the community is small enough, the people who are not helpful or even pleasurable to work with, they get weeded out pretty quickly. And so the thing that I've come to learn is that if you don't have a good reputation, the crowd is small enough to where you're not gonna get, I don't want to say ostracized, but people aren't going to want to work with you again. And I've seen this where people who are just getting into filmmaking, and it's like, oh, I'll go PA on like this set, and they PA for like the first 2 hours of the day, and then suddenly they want to start stepping in and trying to help with the roles that have nothing to do with them, or giving a suggestion on a take or something like that. And it's just like, I've seen directors like bring out the Discord banhammer, just like, all right, no, you can't do that. And oh gosh, there was this one time where we were actually, this one's a little more close to home. I briefly saw this girl for like, 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. And I introduced her to my world. It's like, oh, okay, I'll bring you on set. It's like, and I cleared it with the director and everything. And I'm like, okay, listen, this is, we are here to work. I'm just saying, this is, we'll go on dates and stuff like that. But, if you want to see my world, we're here to work. And she did work. But at some point the director was trying to figure out, like, okay, he was working with the actors. Sometimes you don't always know, the take. You have to kind of find the performance on the spot, depending on like what's going on. And then sure enough, eventually there was enough hesitation where it's like, all right, we could do this or that, and she just didn't know enough about the process, and then she started giving her opinions, and I'm like, oh fuck, this ain't gonna work out. This is not gonna work out. um, uh, yeah, yeah, bittersweet memories.
Yeah, it's tough. And it's tough too because I've been dealing a lot with people coming out of nowhere that I've never spoken with before that are asking me, "Oh, do you have any room on set for this? Like, I really want to get some reps." And I'm in this I'm in this tough spot where I'm like, this is how I got started. I got started, getting on the sets and getting experience and making connections. And I always want to. I would love to be someone that provides that opportunity for other people. But then it's
Because you
also this
sympathize
thing,
with it, you get it.
yeah. But it's also like, I don't know you, and this is a really important project. And I don't know if I need like some guy I've never met before just hanging out while I'm doing these like really intense scenes. So it's like it's been an interesting dance, like trying to figure out how to give people opportunities while also like making sure that I'm preserving my cast and crew that I've cultivated for years and years and years at this point, and allow everybody to like do their jobs. And generally speaking, I find that like 85% of people are chill. Like the
Right.
worst you'll get is they're a little bit introverted and quiet usually. I think that's the thing about just life in general is like 99% of people are pretty cool. You think about all the people that you pass in a day, and who don't bother you, but you only remember like the one person who like wigs out on you and slam their shoulder in you and started yelling at you, and you're like, man, people are crazy. And you're like, you don't think about like the 99 other people you pass in the grocery store that were in their own worlds, like being totally chill. And I think that's it's easy to get hung up on stuff like that. And so it's been really interesting. It's also just been kind of a weird wake up moment where I'm like, oh, you're approaching me for an opportunity. I've spent my entire life like just like trying to network and get on sets and being like, I will hold a light, I will move sandbags. What do you need from me? And it's like, it's weird how small the world can be sometimes.
Well, if a PA is ever requested to go get coffee, or something like that, just know that is the most important job. If somebody's asking you to get coffee, it's because they need coffee. It's not like, oh, you are my bitch, go feed me, go bring me my nutrition for the day. It's like, no, it's because, filmmakers, if coffee's going around on set, it's because they need it, and they're looking at you like the savior or of the situation of the day. Like, you have been endowed with a very important responsibility, believe it or not.
And I will say, I remember the PAs who hustle and are great to work with.
Always.
I was lucky enough, like we shot a teaser trailer recently for this upcoming feature, and my DP brought someone on, Caleb, and I'd never met him before, but my DP Dan was like, he's cool, and that guy worked his butt off, and I was like, what is your number? I'm calling you for the next thing. And so like it really, like people recognize hard work, and if you're reliable and you're not annoying to hang out with, like you're gonna get called back.
Yeah. So let's pivot for a bit, because I do want to get into your feature that you're working on, the part. Go ahead and explain like the synopsis or the premise of it for the audience, and then I really want to get into the actual craft of you as a director. And did you write this script as well?
Yep.
Okay, so it's a writer director combo. Yeah, I like those combos because people who if you write, it's normally directors who write their own material. They're just directors because they want to see the vision that they spend all this time writing through to the end. The director is a secondary aspect to writing. If you're a writer-director combo, would you say that's accurate?
I would say to a certain extent, yes. Certainly when I first started, I was writing stuff, and I remember I was like, I'm going to just be a writer. I'm a writer. And it became very quickly apparent that nobody makes your stuff. Like you have to make it. And so I originally definitely got into directing as like a way to realize the vision on the page. But as I've gotten more into it, I've been like, no, I am a writer and I'm a director. And I do think that, it's really important to, I always tell people when I first started writing, I used to picture everything like it was a play. I would just see the characters in a wide room and they would be interacting with each other. And that was the vision that was in my head. And thankfully, as I've gotten more time on sets, as I've directed more projects, my directing and my editing has fed back into my writing. And now I write more cinematically because I'm picturing like, what is that shot? I would say a good example is in this upcoming feature. Part of the climax of the feature is coming down to a very specific shot angle to sell an emotion. And I don't think 10 years ago I would have thought to do something like that. So I do believe in, some people do, they're writers first and they do direct out of necessity. But I do think it's important to embrace being a director because it's a visual language, and there's so much that you can do with vision. And it just depends on what type of story you're trying to tell too. Some people, they prefer, a more like just talky mumblecore type thing, and you can really just get away with having the actor's performance like hard carry stuff. But I've been getting really into just, the visual language of it too. And I think it's helping my writing a lot too. But sorry, tangent. I have a tendency to ramble.
It's a podcast. If there's not at least one tangent, it's not really a podcast,
The Part is a film that I wrote the script for it forever and ever ago, and it's gone through a lot of iterations. It was originally called Descent. And I was like, yes, it's a great double meaning because it's a descent into madness, but then it's also about family and bloodlines and like the passing on of like mental health and things like that. And then everyone that used to get the script when it was called Descent was like The Descent. And I was like, oh, yeah, there really is just a very popular film called The Descent, and I should probably stop calling this film Descent. And so then one day I Googled The Part film, and there's no movie that's just called The Part. I will say, having done a little bit more like algorithm stuff, like promoting this film, I've come to realize why maybe some films aren't called The Part, because there's 500 million movies that are blah 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 part one, blah 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 part two, and so I don't know. I don't know if it's the most search engine friendly title of all time, but it's very relevant to the movie because the main character, the film's entirely from the main character's POV. We follow this struggling actress named Jamie Lewis, and we spend some time with her in her life as we see that she's dealing with like a lot of anxiety, and she's very codependent on her girlfriend, and she doesn't really put herself out there, and she just really just waits tables and like kind of like passes the time. And her girlfriend is a working director, and she books a really big gig, but it takes her out of the country. And so when she leaves, the main character Jamie has a really tough time dealing with that and starts to kind of spiral a little bit. But
it's a horror film, right?
Huh?
It's a horror film, right?
It's interesting, right? Speaking of, like, I just literally, as of 8 hours ago, closed the crowdfunding campaign for the film. Nice. And marketing it has been this weird tango of being like, it's a horror film, it's a psychological thriller, it's both. It's more of a psychological thriller drama. Oh, it's a horror. There's, a lot of the films that I liken it to they're very like the slow burn horror movies like Midsommar and Hereditary and Black Swan. Mm-hmm. But, those movies have long stretches where it's really more about like just the eeriness and stuff. So, sometimes I call it a horror just because horror is so popular in the indie filmmaking world. I would say it's more of a psychological thriller, but it's one of those things where it's a little tough to define, I suppose. There's certain elements of black comedy in it, because there's like a meta narrative where the main character is like talking to the audience, and she's very sardonic and bleak and stuff like that. But she books an audition, and it's a little eerie, but it seems to go well. But on the way home, she gets into a car crash. And when she wakes up, she's in a house she's never seen before. and there's these people she's never met. And when she's like, "Who are you people?" They're like, "We're your family." And she's like, "What do you mean you're my family? I've never seen you before in my life." And they're like, "Oh my God, you were in a coma and you forgot us. We're going to figure this out." And so the bulk of the movie is sort of navigating this weird situation that she's in, where she's trying to figure out what's real and what isn't, and get to know these strange new people who seem like they're harboring a lot of dark secrets and just general darkness. It's really about just like trying to figure out what's going on with her, because again, the movie's pretty much entirely from her point of view.
What's reality and what's not.
Yes, very much so. And then it's also like, I at least when I write stuff, a lot of it comes down to like what are like the thematic elements that we're playing with. And so, she sees a lot of herself in some of these family members, almost like to an eerie degree. And there's a lot of the characters are carrying around a lot of hurt too. And I do think that one of the main through lines of the film, the reason I always talk about her being so codependent on her girlfriend at the beginning and stuff like that, is she sort of has this hole inside of her that she can't seem to fill, just this need to be wanted and loved. And I always say, like, this film is a little bit of like the monkey's paw scenario, where what's it like to need someone to love you so badly, and then what happens when someone answers that call, but it's in the most fucked up way possible.
You're like, this is not what I bargained for, but it's technically what I wanted.
And I think that's like writing 101. It's like, what does your character want? How do you give it to them in the worst way possible? Or like, what happens? What's the worst thing that can happen to your character and it turns out to be a good thing? There's like different like writing exercises, I think, that people talk about. And I'm really lucky to have assembled a really great cast and crew for it. And my lead is played by Morgan Spencer, who's a local Fort Wayne actor who's just, again, speaking of connections, way back when I was in college, she was on the very first short film I ever worked on. And I was like, she's amazing. And we've just continued to work together and have a friendship ever since. And it's one of those things where you're in the Midwest. It means sometimes you can work with people who are just true magical geniuses that maybe nobody else really knows about. I do think like one of the things that excites me the most is because this film is so laser focused on the central character. I know when this film comes out, people are just going to really gravitate to her performance and just be like, holy shit. Also, Paul, I didn't ask you if I could cuss before we started the show. I've been so good so far. But there's no other way to say it. But yeah, that's sort of like, I guess the synopsis is like her navigating this, and and being a independent filmmaker, I try to write these contained stories, and so there's a large chunk of it takes place in the house as she's like navigating this new situation, and it's contained to the family for the most part, and so it's a lot of just finding 4 stellar actors and just being like, and go.
When you were writing it, how much in your mind did you try to keep the plot and the locations, as well as the scale and the amount of cast that you had to do, in order to keep it budget friendly to make it actually make it?
With this one, it was everything. Like I said, there's like so much of the film takes place in the same house that she wakes up in, and then every sort of like fantastical element, there's like dream sequences in the film, but they all take place in locations that I have access to because I work at the public library. I was like, she's constantly on a theater stage because I have access to a theater stage.
Because of the big theater community in, Fort Wayne.
Well, at the library where I work, we have this giant, awesome theater, and I can just film there when I want, as long as nothing's going on down there.
So is it kind of more like an art center then? Library and theater?
A little bit. And I think a lot of libraries are sort of, here in Fort Wayne, I work at the main branch, Allen County Public Library, and it is literally the address of our library is its own block. It has its own address. It's so large. And we have this huge theater. We have this huge place that we just opened called The Studio with a full podcasting sound booth and 3D printers and 10 Mac laptops that you can work on that have the full Adobe suite on them.
Oh, that's
Our
dope.
our genealogy wing that we have is the second most robust genealogy wing in the entire country. Second only to Salt Lake City. Damn you, Salt Lake City.
Well, those Mormons got to keep track of everything, dude. I mean, like, there's so many people.
For sure. And we have like a whole Abraham Lincoln museum because for some reason we're really obsessed with Abraham Lincoln here. I
think he was from Indiana, though, right?
Yeah, it's something like that. I should probably know, considering I work in a building with an Abraham Lincoln museum. But sorry, I've never watched Lincoln.
Wait, no, he was from Fort Wayne. That's why. Yeah. Okay, sorry, I'm a little bit of a history buff, so that's my tangent.
But yeah, and if people watch the trailer, there's a couple shots of her waitressing, and it's truly just like one of the local restaurants was like, oh yeah, whenever we're closed, have at it. It's like there's a couple scenes where we'll need some extras, but I was very mindful of writing it as contained as possible. I was like, I just need these characters, and it's a lot of like technically the opening of the script takes place in LA, but I wrote it to where we're not like showing off these. She's not going up to the Griffith Observatory and bopping around. It's like she's either in her apartment or working at the diner. So it's like, oh, it's LA, but we'll shoot it in Fort Wayne. It's fine.
What's it like being, because with my personal experience, sometimes when it comes to actors and actresses who have exclusively worked in theater, once they get in front of the camera, you have to end up like toning down their projection. So what's your experience with being able to convert theatrical tendencies to being on camera?
For the most part, I've been incredibly lucky. Again, a lot of the actors I've worked with are incredibly seasoned, and they're just professional enough to trust your guidance. Every once in a while, someone will come in really hot, and you'll just be like, you're at an 8. I need you at a 2. And then sometimes you'll get in the editing room and be like, their 2 was still maybe too big. But it's just a matter of like, I've been making short films for years and years and years at this point, like honing my craft. And part of honing that craft is learning how to guide a performer to do what they need to do for the camera, and I've been lucky enough to work with people like Morgan who are just naturally talented and can convert their performance to the screen. And I think there's a lot of times once an actor has a camera like 2 feet away from their face, there's something so intimate about it that a lot of times they do end up sort of just naturally falling into the rhythm of that. But sometimes you do sit down and say, hey, when you flick your eyes to the right on camera, I'm right there. That is a huge movement. So just trust me and know that this is right. And when I was like shooting the trailer, for example, we weren't doing full scenes. We were just doing shots. It's like, this is the shot where you slam the table. And a lot of the actors were like, I'm feeling like out of the rhythm. And I'm like, I know it feels weird, but trust me, like you're giving me everything I need. And then, when you cut the trailer together and they see it, they go, oh, and part of that is just like, I think it's relevant to working with theater actors is just as a director, developing your craft enough so that actors can trust you, because it's about developing that trust with them. And so if a theater actor's coming in really big, you need to be confident enough to guide them to where you need to be and not just like let them go crazy. And certainly in the past I've had like I said, that at an 8, bring it down to a 2. Oh, I'm in the editing room and the 2's still too big. I've certainly had that experience before, but thankfully I've been pretty lucky. But that's also I think this is probably the case for a lot of directors and stuff. I'm not particularly egotistical or confident about a lot of my skills, but if there's one thing that I'm egotistical about besides my writing, which I feel but that's because I've worked so hard on becoming a good writer. I think the one thing I have going for me personally, and I assume a lot of people have this that rise up, is an eye for talent. Like I feel like when I see somebody, I know they're good. And so a lot of times the people that I'm working with, I see them in something and I'm like, you have something you're special. I want to work with you. And so generally when I get on set with people, it's because I've already just recognized something special in them. And thankfully that has paid off a lot for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
I just think, and it's one of those things where I always tell, I held auditions for this film, right? And I had, dozens and dozens of tapes I went through. And it got to the point where it was really easy to sort of divide the tapes up between this person is still acting when they're not talking and this person's not. Like that's one of the biggest things is just like, are you still engaged in the scene? Are you still reacting even when you're not speaking? I think that's one of the first big separations between like really good actors and people that are new to the craft. I wouldn't say they're bad. They're just still learning, I've seen a lot of people who I deliver a line. Now I switch to off mode. And a lot of times when I'm watching people's stuff, I recognize good actors by being like, who is engaged in the scene still, even when they're not talking. I think that's something that's like really important to look out for. And it happens on theater stages too. And that's what's so special about theater is you kind of make the show yourself as an audience member. You're choosing where you're looking. And a lot of times I'm looking at people that aren't talking to see if they're like engaged in the scene. Cause I think that's so special,
Well, it's an underrated skill. Like, if you're an actor, being able to have presence in the scene, even if you have no dialogue, because acting isn't just, saying words. It's movement, it's posture, it's what you're doing with your hands. That's also one of the things that I noticed, when I've had the occasions to direct something, is that sometimes they don't know what to do with their hands, or they're doing too much with their hands. And especially if you're a theater actor, you're always throwing hands everywhere.
That's why everyone smokes in movies. It's like gives you something to do. You can just sit there with a cigarette and be like, I'm doing something with my hand.
What's the most daunting aspect of this upcoming feature that you have that I wouldn't say that you're terrified for, but there's something about it that you haven't done before, maybe that you're like, okay, this is going to require a lot of mental work on my end to stay focused on and to be able to accomplish it technically?
I think it's time really is what it is like raising money for this movie. The more money we raised in filmmaking, it's literally like money equals time. And so the more money we had, the more time we have. And we raised a pretty significant amount of money and it's given us like a really good cushion, but it is a thing where it's like, well, we're going to have like a week to film this section of the script. And it is a daunting aspect to, we're probably going to be filming more pages a day than maybe if I had infinite budget, I'd be filming like 4 pages a day. I don't have infinite budget, so we're probably filming like 8 pages a day. And that can be really hard if you're not on top of it and you don't have like a strict plan. Then you can get behind so easily. And that's pretty scary, especially when, honestly, this is the first film where people are putting their financial faith in me. Like everything I've made up till now has been, I put a little bit of my own money into it to rent the Airbnb. And like, maybe I pay the sound guy and the actors if I'm lucky and I feed everybody and that's fine. Now all of a sudden people have given me money and they're like, I'm giving you money because you're supposedly a guy who knows what he's doing.
What's that feel like?
It's like you said, that's what's daunting. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. What are you talking about? Why did anybody give me money? But I thankfully, I think I've been able to try to take some of that terror and transition it into, I want to pay off people's trust in me. So it just makes me want to work like 5 times harder to make sure that people's faith has not been misplaced. And I'm excited. I'm excited to find out that's the kind of person I am, and that I don't just want to curl up into a ball and give up and just be like, why did anyone trust me? Instead, I'm like, no, I will show you why this was a good idea.
Well, with each project, you figure out a little bit more about yourself that you didn't know beforehand, and so there ends up being a lot of personal growth. Surprisingly, when it comes to, producing your own creative projects.
Definitely. And it's like, sometimes when I have a podcast and I have to schedule it sometimes. And I was having a conversation with someone and she was like, at one point she was like, "What's your sign?" I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Are you a Pisces? You're really indecisive." And I was like, well, I was like, I just don't want to I just want to be flexible with when your schedule is. But it actually kind of put me in like an existential thought where I was like, well, I'm indecisive when I want to be polite and like I'm doing scheduling and stuff. But like when you're on set, you just have to have a vision and you have to be sure about certain things because the whole being a director means answering all the questions all the time. And the only way things get done is if somebody comes up to you and says, like, do you want the shower curtains half open or fully closed? And it's on you to just be like half open, like instantaneously. You just have to just boom, make decisions. And some of that is like training that instinct. Some of that's just being like, I'm right because my gut is right, I guess. And some of that is just like having an actual vision. I think when it comes to this film, like the best way to save time is to know what you want and what you need. In the past, I've gotten in trouble because I'll overshoot. I'll be like, let's get a close up of that. Okay, we'll run the whole scene in a medium. And it's like I get in the editing room and I've got 5 different shots of the exact same line. You use one shot. And I was like, wow, I really wasted a lot of time shooting this chunk of the scene when really I should have known I want this in a close and that should have been it. And that's been, thankfully I've learned that lesson on other projects and I'm carrying that forward into this feature. I'm like, we're going to be so strapped for time all the time. And it's on me to be like, this is the vision. This is what we need to get this scene done. And that's it. I think like, again, it's about times like, sure, it would be fun to just play around and see what happens. And I do like that. Sometimes I do discover happy accidents where it's like, oh, this moment, I'm glad I was shooting in a wide because the other actor did something really fun and I want to see that. But it's a weird push and pull.
How long? How many pages is the script, and how long is your shooting schedule? Curiously.
The script right now is 88 pages. And then going back to that very first feature I talked about, I learned a really hard lesson, which is like if you're nobody, which I am, nobody wants to see your 2-hour movie. And so I've had a very steadfast commitment to, I was like, the next time I make a feature, it will be 90 minutes on the dot or less. And generally speaking, the rule of pages is that a page equals a minute. It usually evens out. And so I've tried to keep this script as like lean and mean as possible. I'm working on another draft right now where I'm looking at anything else I can sort of strip out and trim down. And, I have a tendency to overwrite dialogue. And I'll go back to it and just be like, oh, this character ripped off a whole paragraph when they could have just looked at her and said no, and that gets the same thing done, maybe even more powerfully. And so I think that's part of rewriting is like being like, here's what the character's saying, what they mean. How do I bury that under a little more subtext and make it more interesting? But shooting schedule, it's pretty wild. At the end of September, we're going to take like essentially a week to shoot like the last 2/3 of the script, which almost exclusively take place in a single location. And then we're going to kind of do pickup shoots for Jamie's life in LA. The person that's playing her girlfriend, Shelby Lewis, lives in LA, even though she's a Fort Wayne native. She moved out to LA 2 years ago and she's doing really cool things. So it's a matter of like finding the weekend where we fly her in and shooting the girlfriend scenes like in like 2 to 3 days and getting that sort of done. And thankfully, a lot of the, using heavy air quotations here, like LA stuff, it's almost exclusively, I've almost exclusively cast it with Fort Wayne locals. So I can kind of pick those shoots up in October and just figure some of those out. Whereas like the family, I've got Jill Ann Marie Klaus, she's coming in from St. Louis, and I've got Chase Strange who's coming in for Terre Haute, and it's like gotta bring all these people together, and so we just need to get them together, shoot that stuff, and get it done. Whereas like the Fort Wayne stuff is like probably going to be 6 or 7 days of like pickup shoots when we can like schedule everything around, because I'm in this weird foot in both worlds thing where I'm working with a lot of professional people, but I am also working with people who have day jobs.
Right.
And again, another thing that's nice about being in the Midwest is like, oh, I'll be in your movie, just don't schedule me on Tuesdays because that's my heavy work day, or just let me know and I'll ask for work off on Friday, and we can shoot, and it's all good. you know.
Hmm. Are you producing this, or do you have any help with that?
I mean, technically, when a film's this small, yes, I'm wearing a producer hat, but thankfully, I've got Victoria Britton, who again was
Okay.
someone that I met a while ago, and she's the one that connected me with Malachi, uh, who was on the show previously, and she's been so huge in helping me put together stuff. She's just so good with schedules and reaching out to people. And I was on the local news recently, and it's because of her. She put together a press release and sent out all these press junkets to people. And
Mm.
then Wayne 15 was like, "Hey, come on our show." And I was like, "Cool." And then I had people that I hadn't talked to in years reaching out and being like, "I saw you on the news." Wouldn't have happened without Victoria. So I'm really, really thankful to have her help. Also, my casting director, Chelsea Kern, is a producer on the film as well. Chelsea helped me find some of the people that are in the movie, and they've just been super huge behind the scenes, like helping me put certain things together as well. So, and then some of my executive producers have really shown out too. A recent friend of mine, Lisa Marie Smith, she read the script and was like, "I'm picturing this for this location." I was like, "That's pretty great, actually." I was like, "I'll follow up on that." There's a supposed to be like a nondescript building that the character goes to, and she sent me a picture and was like, "Think like this," and I was like, "Yeah, that's perfect. Oh
Hmm.
my god, I'm gonna like get in contact with the owner and stuff." And so, and it's been hard because like all my short films, generally, I am like the sole producer. I'm putting everything together, and it's been a learning process to be like, oh, I can trust other people to do stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the hardest transitions is, when you're producing your own stuff, is to actually pass on something really important that is critical to someone else and just have faith they're going to be able to pull it off.
hmm
Yeah.
it can be really hard too. I definitely, I spent all of my school years being the guy in the group project who had to do everything.
Mm.
And even making the short films a lot of times, like, because no one believes in the project as much as you. And that's always going to be a thing, no matter what, no matter how much help you have. It's
Yep.
been a hard lesson that my other fellow filmmakers sometimes have to learn is like, they think everyone's going to like care as much as they do. And it's like, you have to learn time and time again, like no one cares as much as you do. And that's okay, because some people will still care and they will help you, and you can trust them because they're professional and good at what they do.
Hmm.
But it is also on you to make sure you're still shouldering some of the burden and carrying the torch and stuff. But because I've done that solo for so long, it's been a really interesting experience being like, oh, people come through. I'm not used to this. This is amazing. It's hard to not start to feel a little spoiled.
Yeah. How do you feel your short films have best prepared you to be able to tackle a feature?
I think just in general, they have made me be really realistic about what's possible. I just understand what shoot days look like. I understand what's possible to achieve. Uh, one of my recent short films that I released, The Escort, we shot that over the course of 2 days. I think there's a world where I could have tried to push for that to be a single day shoot, but it was like a 14-page script.
Mm.
And at the end of the day, it's like, no, you need to rent the Airbnb for 3 days, and we need to take 2 days to shoot this and really get it right. And it's like, sometimes you look at it and you're like, it's just two characters sitting around and talking. It's like, that still takes time. And that's the biggest thing, is just using the short films as like a gauge to understand what's possible in what amount of time, and sort of like multiplying that over the course of like a feature. And then again, also just making the short films has made me think more visually in my writing. And so like, and it's like less stakes. It's like, oh, we're shooting 5 pages, we're just throwing stuff at the wall, let's try this, and it's given me room to throw stuff at the wall and figure out what works and what doesn't. Whereas it's like, and again, that was why it was weird to jump into a feature as like the first thing, because now the feature is just filled to the brim of things that maybe weren't the best idea that we could have probably figured out if we had started a little smaller. But I think that you just everything is learned is a learning exercise, and I always say like I learn things the hard way, and like every mistake I've ever made on a short film I've carried forward to as a lesson, and I'm taking all of that with me into this feature.
Well, Jake, it's been great getting to know you. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
I'm just anybody that's like, hey, I want you to talk at me for a while. I'm like, oh my God, am I dreaming?
I got one final question. What makes filmmaking worth the headaches and the heartbreaks?
I think filmmaking is one of the things that I do think is so special about film is, and this is maybe like a little existential, but it lives forever. Like, I love plays. I love going and seeing on the stage. There's something live and vibrant about it. But to me, I'm like, film is forever. And everything leads to this moment where this character is giving this performance, and it's profound and moving, and it's captured forever. You can go back and look at my short films, and they're just snapshots in time of a story, and I just think that the fact that it's so permanent is what makes it so beautiful. And film just in general, it's a special medium because it's visual, but it's sonic as well, and it's the culmination of all these different elements that come together that make it sort of unlike anything. And I don't know, I'm someone that likes going to the theater and experiencing a film, and it's really just so fun to get swept away for 2 hours and just live in someone else's world for a while. And I think every medium of art is special in its own way, but film to me it's the culmination of all of these elements that sort of puts it over the top for me. And it's so much build up. I always say it's like months, if not years of pre-pro and all this work to just be on set for 1 week, and then it's over in a flash. And it's like, why do we do this to ourselves? And it's because we're making something that will live forever and be permanent. And it's like this piece of yourself that you're putting out into the world. And I don't know, there's really nothing quite like it.
Well, that's beautiful.
And
Jake,
you can find my book of poetry about filmmaking on www. No, I'm just kidding.
www.nonexistent website.
Oh, wait, that one's taken.
Probably, honestly. Well, Jake, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a treat. I really appreciate it. I think that people that are doing stuff like you that are connecting with filmmakers and getting the word out are so important. And it's just so, in my own podcast, I've used it to make so many connections. And so there's nothing like sitting and talking to someone like this in like a long form content. We don't get to just have conversations that often. And so this is really special. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.